Welcome to Divine Decode, where we turn the noise of modern life into whispers of wisdom. I am Pragya Malvya, and today we explore a question every woman quietly carries. How do we stay whole in a world that keeps demanding more? As the writer and feminist Audre Lorde once said, caring for myself is not self indulgence, it is self preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. And in those words, it lies a profound truth, right? That healing, resting, listening to our bodies, they aren't luxuries, they're acts of remembrance in a world that glorifies burnout. And our guest today, Sharon Neilson, she embodies that remembrance. She is a seasoned RN and holistic women's wellness coach. Sharon has spent over 3 decades helping women reconnect with their divine essence, the part of them untouched by chaos or comparison. And through her work, she's redefining what it means to be a woman in balance, one who thrives not by doing more, but by being more herself. And with that, I'd like to thank you, Sharon, for being on the show. And it's such an honor and pleasure to host you today.
No, thank you, Margaret. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
The energy is same here. And so to start with, Sharon, in this fast moving world where women they're constantly told to have it all, right? Stress has almost become a shared identity. And from your years in healthcare and holistic coaching, what do you think modern stress is really trying to reveal to women rather than, just take from them? Does it have a positive side, or what are the pros and cons? And how do you see it from your vision?
Thank you. Yeah, I do think stress has become yeah, it's like the busy badge that I think a lot of women wear. But I've actually now started to wonder whether this is actually part of the armor that we wear um in our protection mechanism. So I think women, and I feel personally at the moment, there's a lot of change in the air around feministic energies. I think women are becoming more aware of the fact that we have sort of lived and survived in a culture that's very heavily masculine orientated towards the domain of life, so to speak. When you think about the Monday to Friday 9 to 5 kind of concepts, the leadership processes, the way that food is presented even, and the 3 meals a day concept that probably doesn't really work for feminine energy. And I think that what I'm now seeing a lot in the emergency department is that women, exactly as you say, are trying to keep it all together, but they're kind of what I think what's happened is that this is now just part of the conversation. Like, they have become so disconnected from the effects of this that they themselves, it's kind of like this extra layer that's now been put upon us, or that we welcome, I guess, in some ways, but which is now starting to affect us. I think, like yesterday or the day before, I had a lady who came into hospital, similar age to me, and similar, kind of, I suppose, light in the way she was, but she was a property manager. She had recently had a lot of history with sort of diverticulitis, which is a inflammatory bowel process, and it sort of affects your large bowel. And, when you think about the energetics and where our feminine, kind of energy sit, it's in our gut. That's why, you have those strange feelings and messaging that kind of comes from your gut. And I think that what I do see often through my experiences, particularly with diverticulitis, is often a physical sign of with women where they may have had a particularly heightened level of stress in their life, but it might have been 3 months ago. It might be that what's happening is that their level of stress is just sort of slowly increasing over time, and they are kind of trying to compensate But what's happening is that they're then not treating or they're not releasing the impact of that stress, and it kind of sits in their bowel or in their gut. And I guess that then what we're then seeing is that, you then have a presentation where somebody comes and they have this inflammatory process. And this lady actually, her bowel perforated. So because her infection was so great and that she was just pushing through, because she just kind of went, oh, I just think it's my ovaries or my uterus is doing this. And so she just kept kind of pushing through until she got to the point where she was very unwell. And then she had a perforation. She then ultimately had to have surgery. And then kind of she had stoma formation, which is kind of where the bowel kind of comes out the abdominal wall for a temporary period of time to allow the bowel to heal. And then that was reversed. But she then and that was like 2 months ago, but she represented yesterday or the day before, sorry, with this ongoing pain because she's kind of like, oh my God, my pain is the same. It's like, I've got it back again. I've got similar symptoms. And she was terrified that it had all come back again. We did CTs and we did all of the ultrasounds and everything. All of her blood work was clear. Her CT was perfect. She was also tender, sort of around her gallbladder, which she was very tender actually when we examined her, and we did another ultrasound and we sort of sent her home. But I spoke to her the next day. So my role becomes yes, I'll see you in hospital. Yes, I will kind of work with the medical team, but then I follow up with you when you go home. And that's when we get to have these conversations, which is kind of supported the reason and the rationale why I do my wellness business stuff. So she when we were talking about a stress. She was a property manager. She managed, 560 properties herself individually each week, as far as, the clients or the tenants and all of that kind of thing. And that particular day she had something like 160 items of work that she had to deal with. And so we were talking about that and the impact and how she feels within her body and what those physical signs are for her. And women really have become very much like men, where I think almost a semi-trailer has to run over you before people will start to look after themselves. And I think that this is, we're so much smarter than this. Women are so much smarter. And I think that, like, we're intuitively aware that our body is not okay, but we are struggling with giving ourselves the permission to, I think, start to slow down or to acknowledge that we need some space, because the list of to-dos is increasing and we're not very good at triaging where the important things or delegating it to someone else. And I think that this is then now the delicate dance we are trying to do as people and as women who want everything. We can have that, but I think we can only have that as long as we're not putting ourselves at detriment of that, because I'm not sure what the benefit of having it all is if you're then, physically unwell or have chronic pain or, chronic disease. So I absolutely agree with the fact that I think, women need to become more aware and are more alive with what they want. And it's become a sort of the ethos. It's the foundation to my coaching or my business, Eternal Her, for that very reason. It's kind of like your nervous system has to be allowed to repair, because it's the communicator through your body. So if your nervous system is on 24 hours a day, which a lot of women's is, it impacts then how your body is perceiving what's going on. So 100 emails is exactly the same to someone as running from a saber-toothed tiger. Your nervous system can't decipher between the two. All it's doing is reading the energetic intake or your interpretation of what you actually have to do. And I think the more that women start to understand that, I know they're trying to achieve everything and I know that they feel like there's no one else that can do it, but the only person that can start to make a change is themselves. And I think that that's become my like motto, is to give women this permission to be able to breathe and to exhale and to sit quietly, and then to have that discussion about where are they feeling their greatest limits are, or the limitations, I guess, that they have within their health, and how is that sort of impacting on the long-term lifestyle that they really want to live going into, their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Um, because I think we're now beyond, even the 20-year-olds, I think, are actually beyond this, about my, bikini body and the instantaneous requirements that we've kind of been sucked into through media. And I think that, messaging is starting to sort of be about, well, how do I look after my 90-year-old self? Like, when I'm 90 and I look back, what is it that I'm going to do today that she's really proud of? And I think that the stress conversation is so important, and how to regulate their nervous system becomes that first stepping stone towards that.
So true, so true. And I love that lens. Also, if we look at what stress is doing to women in general and in specific, um, it's you can see that with the health hazards that we're having, right? PCOS is one such thing, you know. Increased level of stress is leading to burnouts, and there are so many other diseases and so many other health hazards that are happening. The diets being ruined all because of that. The body is being ruined all of because of this. Even if they're not doing any physical work, they always feel strained and exhausted, and that is, these all are signs of stress, right? And the, and the reason that we need to talk about it is because these need to be addressed, and it's not a very small thing. It's a huge thing. It will become a phenomena. It has become a phenomena, and it's high time that we talk about that. And thank you for that, Lens, because that was much needed, and I love the insights on it. And you often talk about the sacred science of feminine recovery when I read about you. And I heard what you do, right? And in a world driven by productivity metrics and wellness trends, and Instagram um, carousels filled with, oh my God, this is how productive I've been today, and all those LinkedIn posts which talk highly about productivity and wellness. And it's good in some terms, but what does that mean in the real everyday life of a woman who is balancing ambition, family, and her inner world? Because it's, to be very honest, very difficult for women sometimes. And they're actually balancing it all. So, what does that mean in a real everyday life for them, and how do you see it?
Well, I think it is very tricky, and I think that this is part of the conversation around the individual woman and what her needs are. I think something that I struggle with, particularly within the wellness industry, I think, is that it in itself has become, I think, uh, like a casualty almost against the medical model. Like, I think when you think about the medical model, it runs based on anatomy, like that's how doctors have been trained. So if you like the lungs, you're into respiratory. If you like the bowel, then you might be into surgery, or you're into, the inflammatory processes. And really, for women, this is so holistic. Like, it's not just about your anatomy. This is about, your environment. It's about your goals and how you feel as a sacred person within your journey right now. And I really feel that there isn't enough conversation around the feminine side of things for women, because, like you say, it's become very almost industrialized with the way, and like you say, we kind of celebrate that someone has, been for a walk, and then they've been for the gym, and now they're doing, sitting down and they're about to set up for a meeting with a client. And I'm kind of like, well, that's all great, but you're kind of like, if that's not what you want to do on that day, then, why are you doing it? So I think that we've got to start to feel into our bodies. And it does, like you say, it's a very fine line between nurturing ourselves to rest and then kind of like, or believing or creating this false belief that we don't need to do anything. So that there's that game between it's all too hard, and then the other side of I've got to go to the gym 4 or 5 times a week because that's what I'm supposed to do for my wellness. And I think that it's this messaging that, like if you want to go and run 25,000 Ks, I think that that's okay, as long as you are setting yourself up like environmentally and holistically and spiritually, that your body is not holding on to stress, because the act in itself is stressful to the body. But if you're like running 25,000 Ks, or I've just written a blog post actually around this specifically to do with HIIT training and cortisol. And our cortisol is a hormone that is naturally produced in our body and is naturally rises in the morning as part of our waking mechanism. It's how we engage in the day. So the light comes up and our body starts to respond to that. The other problem, though, that we have with cortisol particularly is it is a stress hormone. It's a hormone that engages the body to support it to be in its metabolism to provide ongoing energy. And one of the things that happens with this is that if your parasympathetic nervous system is not then regulating itself back down again, your cortisol stays high because it's part of that. Oh my God, I've got to go to work now. I've got to do my 100 emails. I've got to run away from my tiger. It's all the same conversation. And women, we haven't been trained then to kind of go, okay, that's what I'm doing today, and I'm okay with that, because what I'm actually going to do is once I get through my 100 emails, I'm now going to take some space and some time for myself to deregulate my nervous system and to allow that to sort of start to settle. Because what happens then is that cortisol settles, and you actually kind of then allow the natural hormone production that goes on with energy to resettle, because it's not as required, if that makes sense. I think women these days are also struggling between kind of putting on weight as attached to the stress, and that's a cortisol relationship. But then I think there is also that we're putting on more weight because our perimenopause bodies. So if women are kind of in that mid-30s to sort of 40s, even up to your mid-40s, you may find that you're kind of sitting in a zone of where your hormones, your sex hormones, are starting to sort of decline naturally, as they have done for thousands of years. It's just that what's happened is that we're now living in an industrial age where our environment is not the same as what it was 1,000 years ago. And so what we have to do is we have to become conscious of the fact that our body has not changed. It's everything else around us that has. And our body needs the messaging to say, okay, this is going on, but you're okay and you're safe and you're secure, and I'm going to give you a break. Just let me get through this first, and then I'm going to give you some space. So particularly with during perimenopause, particularly, and I found this too through, I had a difficult marriage. I certainly had then an equally, if not more difficult divorce. And as much as it was kind of a desire of what I wanted because I needed to leave and I didn't know how to do it and all that sort of thing, and that in itself creates stress. I think that you kind of go into this mindset of, like there's a job to be done and I've got to just get it done sort of thing. But unfortunately, that job to do can take 5 or 10 years, to get through. And I think that there's during that time, our body is also starting to change. Like it in itself, the age of the body starts to change. I think the beauty within perimenopause is now that maybe if you can give yourself some space, which is what I have started to do significantly, is really just about kind of acknowledging that you're going through this time. When you have the decrease of your sort of, I suppose, hormones during perimenopause, that's your estrogen and your progesterone start to like decrease. They're the kind of hormones that actually are kind of relating then to your cortisol. They relate to your insulin. There's all of these conversations that normally as a 20-year-old, when you're running down the track and you're trying to get all of these jobs done, they actually work together to actually use all the food that you're consuming to feed your body naturally into sort of an energetic positioning. So it kind of means that insulin is fed into the cells, so it supports the glucose that's going in there, and it means that the mitochondria and all of your muscles are working and all of that kind of thing. But during perimenopause, our sensitivity or our cells' ability to continue to absorb this energy starts to decrease. So it means that then what happens is if you're still eating and living and functioning as you were as a 20-year-old, say in 35, even 40, your body is not doing the same thing as what it was doing when it's 20. And part of the problem is that I think as women, we struggle with the fact that we want to feel like a 20-year-old self again because we know that we can do, but we're kind of not giving the space to our bodies to allow ourselves for the body to still function like that. So, and we have to acknowledge that the body is not doing that. So, and that's kind of the spiritual, that's all the emotional side of going, oh, I've got to take a step back. So if I still want to run my marathons like I was when I was 20, in my 40s, I need to make sure I'm recovering properly, that I'm feeding my body with protein, that I'm hydrating it with, some good electrolytes and some water. I'm eating all of my vegetables. The other thing that is also a problem is the fact that our world supply of food nutritionally is depleted from what it was, even 100 years ago, because the soil itself is depleting. And I think that this is another kind of global thing that we do hear glimpses of talks about it. And I know that people sort of go, well, I just eat organic or whatever. And that's great. Like, that's a very good step. But the problem is that wherever that food is being grown from the first perspective, if that soil is not nutritious, then the food quality itself is not great. And I think that, we have to become aware of kind of where are we sourcing our produce of what we're eating ourselves, like making sure that you are at least trying to have the best quality fruit and vegetables that are fresh. I do know we kind of, because of our lifestyle, we tend to want to eat faster food or food that's already been prepped for us. And that's also contributing to the difficulties with your digestion and your process because all of that food is just filled with, sugar, and it's filled with salt, and it's filled with fats and oils for flavoring and for shelf life. And so we're ingesting that, and there's no problem with having that as a once off or a special treat that you do once a week. But if you're doing that 3 times a day, or even twice a day, you're at work and you buy a meal out, or you've gone out to dinner, or you get a takeaway because you're too tired, or, it's all of that sort of thing that I just think that we have to think about our consumption over the long period of time rather than just today. And the struggle between, I think, for women is that we know we can be better and we can do better because we're smarter intuitively with this. But there's also this drive to be able to run our businesses and to be the CEOs of our life and all of that kind of thing. And I think that that's really important um, because it means that you're still engaging yourself with what you want and taking ownership of that. But I think the next step is to own the fact of what is this doing to us. So weight gain, hypertension, I've started to talk a lot about pre-diabetes or this insulin resistance, which is something that is very much a quiet, um, I call it like a sabotage to your metabolism over time, and can actually, develop. This insulin resistance is purely based on the fact that your pancreas produces insulin. That's its job. Insulin is like the key that takes the glucose that you're eating in your bloodstream, and it is the key that unlocks the door to allow the glucose to go into the cell and work. Now, when all of the doors are full or there's keys all in around the cells, what happens is that extra glucose that's circulating in our bodies then kind of, the insulin keeps producing. Like it just keeps, the pancreas is like, but there's more sugar there. I need to like keep moving this. But insulin in itself can make you fat or does make you fat as a hormone, because what happens is if your cells are already full and all of the doors are already got keys in them, then anything that's left over is then stored as fat. And so what we're now seeing is we're seeing younger generations of girls in particular carrying more weight than they need to. And, we kind of then start the conversation of, well, that's okay. We don't want to fat shame them. And it's not about fat shaming them. This is about your life. This is about your health. And this is about your body and its ability to look after you and carry you. If you're carrying more weight than your body is designed to do, I guess, skeletally and all of the rest of it, it can't work. It can't function. And that makes you tired. That makes you feel, sad. It makes you distressed. It creates the anxiety because you want to go and do something, but you can't because your body's not kind of in that shape that it wants to be. So it's, this insulin resistance can kind of go on very subtly for a good 10 years before your blood work will actually change with the GP. And I have created a giveaway where it's free. People can like do a self-assessment of where their risk of this pre-diabetes. And I did it myself because I was kind of going through this point of going, but I'm doing all this work, I'm eating okay, and I'm going to the gym and all that sort of thing. And I just wanted my shape to change. And so I thought, oh my goodness, I wonder if I'm pre-diabetic kind of thing. Anyway, I went and had my bloods and my bloods were okay. But it was enough of a scare for me to kind of go, oh my goodness, I think I've become one of these people. And it was kind of because what happens is this is where diabetes comes from. So diabetes just doesn't happen overnight. It's been there for years. And then if you've got diabetes in your family, that's one of the risk factors for you. And so it becomes really important for women to think about their nutrition from a point of, I want my body to function properly rather than I need to be a size 0 because that's what all the Instagram is saying I should be, or that's what you're seeing on Instagram, kind of thing. And I think the thing is that, it's fantastic to want to look desirable and to be energetic and to feel like this flowing, gorgeous human. And it's important to do that at a weight that is appropriate for your skeleton. But it's also important for your doing it from a energetic perspective rather than just that physical, I want to go to the beach and I want to look fantastic. So, and this takes years. This is years and years and years of work. And I guess that the thing is that certainly when we're 20, our metabolisms and all of that kind of thing respond to that 6 or 8 week challenge that happens at the gym. But your body doesn't do that in its 40s or its 50s because it takes longer to do because of the hormones and the changing of what's going on. So the body has to be retaught. It has to be told what you want it to do, but you're trying to do it in a positive way and you're trying to be supportive. And I just think that, if I can contribute to that conversation for women and to create that ability for them to sort of feel at least someone's in their corner and they're not sort of trying to do this independently, I think then I've started to do my job. And if it means that I can keep you out of hospital because you've learnt something that kind of triggers, or that at least creates that step towards you investigating things further, then again, like I see it every day in the emergency department now, and it is something that has become so strong for me to try and distill, to let women know it's okay to let go and it's okay to surrender for a while. Because I think the other thing is that we emotionally, I think, are engaged with the fact that we know that no one's coming to save us. Like, I think that message is now very much around. Um, and I think there's an element of disappointment because we've grown up hoping that someone would be our savior and look after us and all of that sort of thing. And now we're kind of going through this change in process where there isn't anyone there. We're responsible for ourselves, and we can become our own worst enemy if we choose not to listen to our body.
That is actually so true, and that is such a beautiful vision because women healing not just for themselves but for an entire lineage is the idea behind it. Because we know that if there is a woman healing themselves, they'll heal the world around them,
Mm.
and that is what we do. And Sharon, thank you for reminding us that stress, science, and spirit, they are not opposites, they're sacred threads woven into the same tapestry of womanhood. And that is what I take from you today. And to everybody listening, may you slow down just enough today to hear the divine rhythm beneath the noise. Because your glow is not something to chase, it's something already alive within you and are deeply by that. And I am Pragya, and this was Divine Decode. Until next time, stay rooted, stay radiant, and stay real.